Hey everyone, my name is Nikolai Pavlov and I welcome you to my channel. In this video we'll look at a couple of examples of how to use CountIF and SumIF in Power BI. If you come from the world of Excel, like me, you know that SumIF and CountIF are two very commonly used functions. And I think these two functions, as well as VLOOKUP, are probably the first real milestones in a person's level of Excel development and mastery, right? Because upon learning these functions, you can pretty much do most Excel-related tasks in your company as a business user. So anyways, when people come from Excel to Power BI, the obvious question is, where is SumIF and CountIF? Turns out there are none. Well, at least there are no direct SumIF and CountIF functions in DAX. However, there are a few different ways how you can substitute SumIF and CountIF using DAX. So let's start with SumIF because it's easier. The point is, if you have a data model with relationships built between tables, then the filter context will be automatically applied. When you look at the January sales, for example, right, this is already kind of an Excel SumIF function. In other words, because Power BI works with data models, you automatically get SumIF all the time. Now think about this. If you wanted to get this table in Excel, you would have to use SumIF. You would probably put SumIF here, and then you'll show the range of the values that you want to sum, and then show, and then as a criteria you would choose January. Another way to replace SumIF is to use the calculate function and a set of conditions in the filter parameter. If we take a look at our table here, I'm thinking on the fly right now with you guys. Let me show you an example. We have different units sold, right? And then we have different price. Maybe let's see what is the total sales of all the items that cost less than $100. It's a classic SumIF case, right? Let's build a measure using the calculate function. Units under $100. As I said, it's going to be calculate, and we're going to use SumX inside. Inside SumX, the table will be the sales table, and in the sales table, what we're going to do, we're going to multiply unit price by quantity, by unit quantity, and the filter will be unit price less than 100. So to find out the SumIF, in this case we used the calculate function, and then we put the criteria of unit price less than $100 in as a filter to the calculate function. Now let's move on to CountIF. In my table, I would like to find out a number of transactions per each month. So if we go to our table, I just want to explain one thing. So in the sales table, right, we see that each row of this table equals to a transaction, right? So one row is one transaction, and you can see that there's the total of 2,282,042 and 482 transactions, right? And also, what's important is here that each transaction has its own unique key, sales key. The first thing how we can count the number of transactions in this table is simply to drag a sales key into our table and, importantly, go here and choose count. So now we have the count of transactions. So in January 2011, there were 73,868 transactions. The second option how to get the same result is to create a measure using the CountA or CountRows functions. So we're going to name the measure count of transactions, and I'm going to use simple CountRows function. And CountRows counts the number of rows in the table. So we're just going to show which table we're going to use, sales table. and simply count the number of rows. Count of transactions. Exactly, we have exactly the same number. You can also use another DAX function, which is CountA, which will bring you the same result. And finally, in some cases, you would want to create a separate calculated column in a table with the count of transactions per each day. Let me put these dates ascending, and then I'll show you what I mean. For example, there were a certain number of sales done each day, right? Probably thousands of sales, thousands of transactions. And what I want to do is we want to build a column in this table which will show the number of transactions that happened on that particular day. On January 1st, for example, there were, let's see how many transactions there were actually using simple filter function. So on Saturday, January 1st of 2011, there were, you see, 2,453 sales. So what I want is, I want in every row of the table, right, in front of every date, I want the number of transactions that happened on that day. All right, so we create the calculated column, and we're going to name it number of transactions equals to make a formula a little bit easier to read, we're actually going to use variables here. We'll introduce a variable. Let's name it CurrentRowDate, right? Which just equals to DateKey to the DateKey, right? And we will return CountRows. We will count rows in a table, right? But we're gonna introduce a filter here, all in the sales table, in which we're only going to count rows where current row date, my variable, equals to the current date key. So what the formula does, essentially, it goes to the table, right? And then the all function says that ignore all the filters and go and look at the entire table, and then go find my variable, which is date key, right? So January 1st. And then go to this table and see how many of my variables actually match the date sales key. And if they match, count the number of them. And now we have a separate column in our sales table, right, which shows the number of transactions that happened on that particular day. So on January 1st, there were 2,453 transactions. And if we filtered January 1st, we can see here that it shows the same number, right, 2453. Now, if we put this column into our table, right, and then we did it count, we counted it, then we'll have the same number as the other two, then we'll have the same number as before. Now the important question here is, you may ask, why would I need to create the column in my table, right, if I already have the measure for the same number, right? That's a good question. And to answer this question, right, we need to remember the differences between the calculated columns and measures. Measures are generally better, but they can be limited when it comes to additional mathematical calculations. Let's say, you know, I wanted to know the average number of transactions per month, right? Or the day with the lowest transaction, or which was the day with the highest transaction. My measure can't really provide that, but I want average and then the maximum and the minimum. What can I do? Look at this. When I add this column, if I create a column, then I suddenly have more options to choose from. So I can do average. So for example, average number of transactions per day in January was 2,385, right? And then I can do the minimum and the maximum. So when I put this, I know that the minimum, the lowest day in terms of transactions in January was, for example, 2,231. So this gives you a bit more things to play with, right? And then I can also do a maximum. Well, if I did count, then I will return to this number here, right? When you do a calculated column, it gives you extra options to make calculations. Anyways, that's it for today, guys. Hopefully I cleared some of the questions you might have had about the use of SumIF and CountIF in Power BI. If you find my videos helpful, please subscribe and feel free to ask any questions in the comment section. See you later, and take care of yourself, guys.